So next up is Ian Portsmouth. Ian's going to be sharing growth lessons from Canada's fastest growing companies. Ian is the group publisher business at Rogers Publishing Limited, where he oversees 3 of Canada's top media brands in business and finance: Canadian Business, MoneySense, and PROFIT. Thanks to an 18-year journalism career dedicated to the exploration of business management, Ian is a trusted media commentator and public speaker on best practices of independent businesses and high-growth companies. He's also the co-author of Marketing Masters, The Best Ideas of Canada's Savviest Marketers. I had the pleasure of seeing Ian give the same speech, or similar speech, in Halifax earlier in the year, and I'm sure you're in for some great, great content. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for that overly generous introduction, which you can tell my mother wrote. I didn't write that, I swear to God. So my presentation is called Secrets of Success of Canada's Fastest Growing Companies, and it is based on the work that I've done over the past 20 years now with the fastest growing companies in Canada, which we've studied every year since 1989 at Profit magazine. And I think that this presentation is going to be quite different from perhaps some of the other presentations you're going to experience today, because it is going to be very high level, hopefully get you out of the weeds to think a little bit more strategically about your businesses, whether you run an entire publishing brand or whether you just are pushing out content for your website and trying to monetize that the best way you possibly can. So, Profit magazine was founded in 1982 as the magazine that's all about small business. Clearly, words were cheap back then because you could have such long titles for magazines. Magazine design was apparently still in its infancy in 1982. That's our debut issue back when the interest rate, I think, at the month that we launched was something like 23%. Compared to 1.5% prime rate now. So it was very difficult for businesses back then. And that's why I call it the not so golden age of entrepreneurship. It's the not so golden age of entrepreneurship back then because in Canada it was a difficult place to start to run and to grow a small or mid-sized business. Canada was really a country that, whether we're talking about the banks, government, or even Canadians culturally didn't really think much about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs were always looked on as people who were trying to make a fast buck and take advantage of somebody else. Fortunately, things have changed a lot since then, but there was a joke at the time and it went like this: how do you build a successful small business in Canada? Anyone want to take a stab at that? You start with a big business and you let it shrink. Exactly. So that really echoes the sentiment among entrepreneurs at the time. You had to start a big business and then just wait for it to shrink if you wanted it to be a small business. Luckily, that does not apply anymore, and it does not apply in ways that are going to be important to all of your businesses as well, I think. I like to call this the golden age of entrepreneurship, not because magazines for entrepreneurs look a lot better than they used to. But for 5 key reasons. First is we all have access to much more powerful and affordable technologies than small and mid-sized businesses did in 1982. Back then, investing in technology was extraordinarily capital intensive, and there wasn't a lot of technology out there. There wasn't a lot of choice. Nowadays, as you all know, you can get tons of really powerful stuff to run your business, to run your websites with. That's often extraordinarily low cost or free. So the playing field has really been leveled in terms of access to technology. Secondly, I think we're really in what I call the outsourcing economy. Large companies for the past really 20 years have been trying to divest themselves of all operations and responsibilities that don't drive their core business, that don't drive profitability, that they're not particularly good at. And that has created a lot of opportunity for smaller businesses to supply some of that, those services and products to the businesses. And of course, it's also given birth to a lot of freelance opportunities. A lot of freelancers can now much more easily find companies to service, and companies can find them through platforms such as Odesk or Elance. Globalization is another one. I know that globalization is a double-edged sword. If a foreign media company comes into your backyard and starts operating, it hurts. But I think that globalization presents a net opportunity for Canadian businesses because if you have a good value proposition, you can sell it anywhere. Where foreign competition becomes problematic is when you actually don't have a good value proposition, you just happen to have the best one at the present time in your market. And no matter what industry you're in, anybody can come along and wipe you off the map if you don't have a strong value proposition. Fourthly, access to capital. Back in 1982, if you were a small business owner, an entrepreneur, you basically went to your friends and family for money. If you were lucky, the bank would give you a loan, and that was it. Nowadays, it's much more easy to find funding to invest in technology, to start businesses, to hire more people. If you look at a program like Dragon's Den is certainly not an effective source of capital because about 3 people a year get money out of Dragon's Den's deals. But it does reflect what's happening in the angel investor market. It's very, very easy, at least relative to back in 1982, to find angel investors, to find those people who have $20,000 or $100,000 to put in your business because, frankly, you can now find them all online. And finally, I think there's just much greater cultural acceptance of entrepreneurs in Canada. Look at Dragon's Den. Dragon's Den has tuned people in to the fact that there are amazing people out there with bold ideas and great ambitions who are very inspiring. And now we all look at, I shouldn't say we all look at, but many more Canadians look at people who are running and starting their own businesses with a kind eye. They no longer look at them cynically, and in fact, you know, the typical kid going into university when they're 18 nowadays, probably thinks of starting his or her own business as a legitimate career option and something that they are likely to pursue. Whereas back in 1982, you went to university because you wanted to find a job with somebody else. So then the question becomes, is this actually the golden age of magazine publishing if it's the golden age of entrepreneurship? Because I think we are all entrepreneurs. We all run a business or we run part of a business. It's all about profit and loss. It's all about audience engagement and all of those other metrics that you measure that generate revenue for your companies. And it's, you know, when I say that it is the golden age of magazine publish, you might roll your eyes and think, you know, what is this guy talking about? But when I say that, I say it because, again, if you have access to very powerful and affordable technologies, if you are able to outsource a lot of your work to, say, people who work in foreign markets, if you are able to be one of the companies to whom a large company outsources, such as in the content marketing game, right? Companies aren't trying to produce their own content. They're coming to us and asking us to produce their content for them. If you see an opportunity or if you have a good value proposition, you can go into foreign markets. The point here is that this is the golden age of magazine publishing because basically anybody can become a publisher. The means of production no longer belong with the McLean Hunters or the Rogers or the TVAs of the world. Anybody can get into publishing. It's not necessarily putting putting words and pictures on a page and distributing it, but there are many ways that we can distribute content, and there are very few barriers to entry. So I do think it's about it is the golden age of magazine publishing. And I think it's also about thinking outside the box of, again, words and pictures on a page or even on a website. Henry Ford is famously quoted as saying, if I had asked people what they said they wanted, they would have told me they wanted faster horses. So he realized that, you know what, it's not about horses, it's about transportation. How can we get people from point A to point B independently in an affordable manner? And the answer was the Model T, of course. So what is the business that we as magazine publishers and editors are in? I think that we are in the business of delivering benefits to our constituencies, which is a way of saying we're really about creating value for people. And again, that sounds like a motherhood statement. It sounds very obvious. But perhaps you can think about 3 key ways in which we deliver benefits to our audiences, or perhaps the 3 benefits that we can actually deliver to our audiences. One of them is practical. So people come to us, they read our content, they come to our companies because they want us to empower them with knowledge, they want us to help them save time, they want us to connect them to other people, to other organizations. So that's a practical benefit. There are emotional benefits to what we do. So audiences come to us because they want us to make them laugh, they want us to make them cry. Sometimes they want to depress us, which happened to me this morning when I got suckered into a slideshow that was the 15 hottest athletes you want to date but are way out of your league. So that was an actual slideshow that I got sucked into looking at this morning. And then I sat in my room, hotel room, for 3 hours, and that's why I didn't show up until lunchtime. So anyhow, but you know, somebody's making money off of making me depressed, making people happy, making people cry. It's an emotional benefit. It's the reason we go to the movie theater to see a movie. It's not because we're going to learn anything watching that movie. It's because we want the emotional experience. And finally, audiences are looking often for expressive benefits, and that's the status or prestige that comes with associating themselves with your brand. I've been in a lot of offices of startup entrepreneurs and CEOs who conveniently have the Harvard Business Review or Fast Company magazine perched on the end of your desk where you can see it because they want to say, this is who I am. It's the same reason we wear Nike t-shirts and all of the other stuff. So we can deliver expressive benefits to our audiences. We can also deliver these kinds of things to advertisers, the people who pay most of our bills nowadays. We can create brand exposure or brand awareness for them. We can generate leads for them. We can give them insights through research that helps them understand the audience or the market that they're trying to serve. We can deliver emotional experiences or emotional benefits to advertisers. That sounds a bit strange, but you have to remember that every advertiser is really just a collection of human beings. And when you're in front of somebody selling them something, you're trying to create emotions in them. You're trying to make them feel confident. You're trying to make them feel happy. You're rarely trying to make them feel sad or guilty or anything like that. But you are creating an emotional benefit from them. They buy your product and they walk away thinking, man, I made a smart decision. And finally, you can deliver expressive benefits even to advertisers. You will see advertisers who are only in certain prestige magazines, for instance, because they want to associate themselves. They don't only want to reach that audience, they want to associate themselves with the Wall Street Journal, with Monocle, with Fast Company, with Wired, because it makes them seem hipper or smarter or more authoritative than the world might think they actually are. So those are the kinds of benefits that we always have to think about delivering no matter what we do. So again, it's the golden age of magazine publishing because the playing field has been leveled. If you have a good idea and you know how to execute it, you can make money in this business and you can grow your business. It's just getting harder for people who can't do those things to get ahead. And frankly, I wonder if you don't have a good idea and you suck at running your business, then, don't complain. So, at Profit, we launched in 1989 the ranking of Canada's fastest growing companies. And over the years, we've probably ranked 3,000 or 4,000 companies. I would say 95% of them you have never heard of and probably never will. But these are all companies that have been successful in their own industries and became known in their own niches. There have been some very well-known companies on the ranking before. 2 that were actually founded in Calgary, WestJet and Forzani Group, which runs the Sport Check chain, have been on our Profit 500 ranking in the past. You will see this rather shiny-looking guy right there. His name is Kevin O'Leary from Dragon's Den. And he ran Canada's fastest growing company when it made our list in 1982, a software company called SoftKey Software. We've also had Robert Herjavec of Dragon's Den and Shark Tank on our ranking, not once, but twice, with 2 separate companies. So I like to think of Robert as a really amazing entrepreneur. We just released our most recent, our 27th annual Profit 500 ranking. And by the way, it hasn't always been 500, as you can see, last week, last Thursday. This is how fast the average company has grown over the past 5 years, by 686%. So if you do the math, that's actually almost a multiple of 8 from their revenue 5 years ago. And they've grown at a rate that's 51 times faster than the overall economy over those past 5 years. So these are really, really, really amazing companies. But they are not that different demographically than the companies that we run. They are as small as $2 million in annual revenue, and they're only they don't get below that because that's our minimum revenue limit for these companies. There are lots of companies that try to get on the ranking that are not big enough. Some of them have as few as 2 employees. Of course, they outsource a lot of what they do, but they really only have 2 employees, and the largest company has 32,000 employees. It's a waste management firm. Some of the companies are as young as 6 years old because to have a 5-year growth rate, you have to have been around for 6 years. But there are several that are decades and decades old, and our oldest company is now called D+H. Used to be called Davis & Henderson. If you're old enough to have ever had a checkbook, then Davis & Henderson is likely the one who you had to order your checkbook from. 115-year-old company that is now among Canada's fastest growing, despite how old it is. They're publicly traded companies, lots of family-run businesses. The vast majority are private companies run by 1, 2, or 3 entrepreneurs. The CEOs or the entrepreneurs running these companies are as young as 24, so that guy started his business when he was 18. The oldest is 71 this year. And the great news is that despite the fact that they have such amazing growth rates, they are not all in high tech, which most people assume when they see those growth rates. In fact, in the 27 years that we've ranked the fastest growing companies in Canada, at least half of the companies in any given year are from what I call traditional industries. So they are in mortgage brokerage, they're retailers, they're insurers, they're people who pave driveways, they're in transportation and logistics. You do not have to be a high-tech firm to generate these kinds of growth. And as a matter of fact, you can be in the magazine business and generate growth rates like these. So this year we were happy to have 2 magazine publishers on this year's ranking, and I was extraordinarily happy to have 2 magazine publishers on the ranking that I could talk about today. I was sweating it out for a little while there. I can tell you a little bit about these 2 publishers. This company is called LabX Media. It ranked 225th out of the 500. Growth rate is, I think, 261% over the past 5 years. It has sales in excess of $10 million, and it's based in Midland, Ontario. So Midland is a pretty small town nestled close to the Bruce Peninsula between Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. So they're running what actually happens to be an international business out of Midland, Ontario, in magazine publishing with $10 million in sales. That's now almost 4 times bigger than it was 5 years ago. As you can see, it has one magazine called Lab Manager. It produces actually 2 magazines that are for sort of the laboratory market. It also sells data and runs events, if I'm not mistaken. While we're, as magazine publishers, are always trying to extend our brands into other media and other platforms, this is a company that actually got into magazine publishing the opposite way. It began as an online classified advertising business, helping companies buy and sell laboratory equipment. And now it's become the company that it is today, LabX Media out of Midland, Ontario. And then there's KMI Publishing, which I'll get into a little bit more about this later, but it's a company based in Toronto. It publishes a few magazines in Canada, also runs websites, produces events. Its revenue is somewhere between $2.5 million and $5 million. It's grown its business by about 66% in the past 5 years, which I think is a number that we would probably all like to have with our businesses. And it serves mainly a trade audience, but also consumers. As you can see, this is a magazine that you can get on pretty much any newsstand, and it is for real estate investors. So, 2 great magazine success stories on this year's Profit 500 to give you some inspiration. So, as you can see, the companies on the Profit 500 ranking come from all kinds of industries. They're all shapes and sizes. They're run by all kinds of different people, and they do a lot of different things to succeed. But I think at their core, they do 4 things pretty well, or they have 4 key characteristics, common characteristics. First of all, their founders are very determined and resilient. Running a small business is hard. Starting a business is extraordinarily hard. Running a company growing this quickly is even harder than the 2 things I just mentioned. These are very determined, resilient people, and they should provide a lot of inspiration to us in our very challenging industry. They have a willingness to innovate. So what I mean by this is they don't just want to create brand new products and services, but they also want to find new and better ways of actually running their companies and doing business. And that's really what my presentation is about. They have a passion for growth. There are a lot of entrepreneurs out there or small business owners who don't understand why anyone would want to grow their company from $500,000 a year to $50 million a year because they're in it more for the lifestyle. These people are not really in it for the lifestyle. They might want to buy a yacht in a private island somewhere down the road, but they're willing to sacrifice their lives now in order to reach that end goal. But what's really driving these people is the fact that they believe so much in their products and services that they want everyone in the market to have their product or service. And that's why they grow. And finally, they have an ability to execute timely strategies, which is my jumping off point into the 5 success strategies of Canada's fastest growing companies. Does anyone have a question about anything I've said thus far? No? Okay, so good. Here are the 5 success strategies of Canada's fastest growing companies. They're strategies that have been used by companies of all shapes and sizes in all industries, and I think they can apply in your own businesses, whether you are a publisher or you are in charge of web editorial. They are be like Advil, steal the best ideas, seek trusted advisors, turbocharge your team, and grow beyond your borders. So let's see what each of those means. Be like Advil means to provide better pain relief than anyone in your market at a price that people are willing to pay. I like to use Advil as the metaphor or symbol of this principle because Advil is really a wonder drug, and many of us use it, and I think we can all afford Advil. If you can be the Advil in your market, you can grow an amazing business and make good profit. If you are not like Advil, then what ends up happening is you have to compete on something that we all know of as, if you don't have a competitive advantage, what do you have to compete on? What's your only competitive advantage if you don't have anything other than, sorry? Price, yes. It's always price. Because eventually somebody's going to catch up to your service and then you have to drive down your prices. And if any of you have websites that are selling ad inventory at 77-cent CPM, then you know all about what it means to compete on price. And of course, nobody wants to compete on price because when you compete on price, you do not have a sustainable competitive advantage, and your margins are going to get killed, and the result is always inevitable. So what you want to do is you want to be like Advil. You want to bring a unique value proposition to market, something that's very compelling that people are willing to pay for. Because if you can do that, then people will just gravitate towards your business. And this is the paradigm example of a company that is like Advil. It's called Kids & Company. It's been on our ranking 8 consecutive years. It now has revenue approaching $60 million. And in the most recent 5 years, it grew by 203%. So it tripled its revenue from 20 to 60 million in 5 years. And at one point in time, it ranked #1 on our list with 5-year growth of over 13,000%. Can anyone tell me what business this company could conceivably be in? That's right. So it's a child care provider. It's a national daycare chain. It started out with one location. So the two founders here, Victoria and Jennifer, they knew that they had to bring something brand new to the marketplace. So they had three very distinct competitive advantages when they launched Kids & Company. Number one, they were the first daycare chain in Canada to offer 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week childcare, because they knew that that would give them a leg up over all of the other daycares who could not meet the needs of shift workers. Secondly, they were the first daycare chain in Canada to provide emergency backup childcare. So if any of you have ever had kids in daycare, you know that you either have to commit to bringing your kid full-time or part-time on a fixed schedule. There are certain days of the week you can show up and don't bother showing up the rest of the week. Well, the problem with a lot of parents is that they have alternative childcare arrangements, alternative to daycare, but sometimes something falls through. The nanny is ill, grandma's sick or goes on vacation, and now what do? Kids & Company will sell you a pass for a year that entitles you to either 10 or 20 visits to any of their locations without any notice. So you can literally show up at 7 in the morning at their downtown Calgary location, and presuming they have one, and I think they do, and drop off your child because your nanny is sick, and they will take you in. Another great competitive advantage. Nobody else was offering this at the time. And thirdly, their really interesting competitive advantage is that when Kids & Company first launched, the only way that you could take your kids to a Kids & Company location was if your employer was under contract with Kids & Company. So employers would go to Kids & Company and say, here's $10,000, that's our annual fee, contractual fee, and now you're going to let any of our employers use your service. It doesn't mean that they paid for the child care. It was just so that Kids & Company would say, yeah, sure, we can talk about getting your kid in here. And by the way, it's $1,500 a month or whatever it is. Why would this be a competitive advantage? The competitive advantage is that in today's labor market, it's very hard to find and keep good people. And when a working parent is looking or evaluating a new job opportunity, and any working parents out there in the audience can probably attest to this, one of the first questions you ask yourself about this job opportunity is, how is this going to affect my existing childcare arrangement? And now Kids & Company could give employers at least part of the answer to every applicant's question around childcare. So, three very powerful competitive advantages. Now, none of these competitive advantages was unassailable. Anyone could come along and start doing the same thing. And in fact, companies have replicated some of these things that Kids & Company offers to the marketplace. But what's really important is that Kids & Company came out with these three very distinct competitive advantages all at the same time, and they were able to grow from nothing to $60 million over the course of what's now been 10 or 11 years. And no one has been able to catch up to them. They're just so far ahead of everyone else that, you know, their position now is not unassailable, because no position is unassailable. But it's going to be very hard for anybody to compete with them going forward. So one of the things that I think plagues our industry is that we may think that we're better at what we do than our competitors. You know, we look at other magazines and we can say, oh my God, I can't believe what they did on the cover of the magazine. And we go to other websites and we say, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, who was the person who did the UX for this website? And we go to our advertisers and we say, hey, ours is better than that. And the advertisers always say, yeah, I'm not really sure I can really tell the difference between two things, prove it. And the problem in our industry is we too often don't have metrics, right, to demonstrate how we are better than the competition. So whatever you decide your competitive advantage is, if it's not crystal clear, like whether or not you offer 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week childcare, which is very binary and very apparent to the end user, you need metrics to back things up. So Lisa, I think you spoke about metrics this morning, and We just need metrics not only to make decisions about what we should do, but also to demonstrate that we have a different kind of relationship with our audience than the competition does. Because otherwise, anybody can say anything they want about their business. Strategy number 2 is to steal the best ideas. And when I mean steal, because we're Canadians, I really mean just borrow them. Try not to steal anyone's intellectual property and get yourself into trouble, because I hate when that happens to me. But anyhow, this is found innovation, or what's called found innovation. Innovation is often mistaken with doing a lot of elaborate, intensive, costly research and development to come up with a new product or service, when frankly, the low-hanging fruit in all of our businesses is just finding ideas out there in the marketplace, whether it's in your industry or outside of your industry or even outside of the realm of business, and bringing the good ideas into your business. There's a technical term for this, and it is found innovation. So we always want to find new and better ways to run our businesses, because they will reduce the time, the risk, and the cost associated with growing our businesses. You know, why reinvent the wheel when you can just go and borrow somebody else's? So a paradigm example of this is WestJet. So as Albertans, and I think most of you in the room are Albertans, and many of you will be Calgarians, you probably know the story of WestJet. And you don't need me to repeat it, but very quickly, WestJet was not an original idea. Southwest Airlines was doing exactly what WestJet brought to market in 1997. And the founders of WestJet looked at Southwest Airlines and said, you know what, there's nobody up in Canada doing this. There's nobody who is doing short-haul flights that are competing with the car the way Southwest Airlines was. There was nobody up here who had flight attendants who would sing songs and tell jokes over the intercom. Air Canada and Canadian Airlines did not have employee share ownership plans that made every employee an part owner of the business. So they saw Southwest Airlines and they basically replicated that exact concept in Canada, and the results speak for themselves. And as it happens, Kits & Company did the exact same thing. The idea of 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week daycare, emergency backup childcare, contracting with employers to provide exclusivity for their employees, not their idea. There were 2 companies in the US doing this when Kits & Company launched, but nobody was doing it in Canada, so they just brought the concept up to Canada. So there are very powerful ideas out there that you can bring to market, that you can bring into your business. And we've done that at Canadian business. Over the past few years, we've noticed that The Economist and Forbes magazines had brought their basically insights programs to market, which are sort of a blend of research and directed content, all packaged up into these really nice reports that are extraordinarily authoritative and leverage the brands of those publications and leverage the editorial integrity and credibility of those publications, but suit the advertiser's goals. So we saw how many Forbes Insights and Economist Intelligence Unit reports were coming out, and we thought, you know what, nobody is doing this in Canada, nobody was doing this in Canada, so why don't we get into this game as well? And we launched a business called CB Insights, Canadian Business Insights, which does largely the same thing. We will do anything from original market research to events, all of them with some degree of direction from the advertiser, not necessarily where the advertiser gets to approve any of the content that we produce. That's something else that somebody else can take care of. But we do this. It has been a good little startup for us. The beauty of it is that it's pretty high margin. As an incremental opportunity for us, it doesn't cost us a lot to go out and do original market research, to produce these reports, to use our existing distribution channels to get the word out there. So it's a nice way to generate incremental margin to what we're doing now. For all the publishers and anyone on the sales side in the room, I will warn you that the challenge with this is it's not something that you can sell through the traditional agency system. You really have to get in front of clients, and you have to know exactly what is on the client's mind in order to tailor one of these reports or get them interested in doing one of these reports with you. Another way we've stolen a great idea out in the marketplace is something we've done at MoneySense. So you're familiar with Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, PC Mag Editor's Choice. I mean, lots of publications have seals of approval programs that they produce. I wanted to put the Calgary version of this up there, but the logo was so ghastly that I just went with the Vancouver and Georgia Strait logo. But we're doing this at MoneySense. The sad thing is that we were humming along for about 4 years doing our annual Canada's Best Credit Cards ranking. So we have one particular editor on our staff who invests pretty much all of his time for several weeks every summer collecting all of the data on upwards of 220 nationally available credit cards to try to figure out what is the best credit card for your money in categories such as retail, rewards, business travel, etc. So every year we publish this, and we would go to advertisers and say, would you like to be in our best credit cards package? And they would say, well, I don't know, maybe, but we don't know if we're going to be #1 or if we're going to be rated the worst credit card in Canada, so forget it. And we thought, why don't we just give the best credit cards the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, call it MoneySense #1, and get them to pay us for that. So again, it's a nice little thing that we're now doing. It includes a 1-year rights to a seal of approval that the credit card company can use in all of its marketing and advertising material. We've sold media packages around it, both digital and in print. And we do all of it at absolutely no incremental cost to the ranking that we were already producing in the magazine.
What happens if the credit card doesn't buy your seal?
If they don't buy the seal?
Yeah, do you still rank #1 or?
Yes, because it has nothing to do with whether or not they buy the seal.
And what percentage of the best cards buy the seal?
Well, I think we only rank best cards in 9 categories. And last year we had 3 credit cards that bought the seal, and I think this year it's 3 as well. Yeah, and it's pure margin. Like it doesn't cost us anything to do any of this apart from our standard work. So I think, yeah, the one thing about seal of approval programs is that, smart consumers are naturally skeptical, and they wonder if a company was named #1 because they bought an ad. And that's the knock against a lot of the hip downtown free newspapers who give everybody, the worst pizza place in town always gets the #1 pizza. And everybody asks that because they bought the ad. The good thing about this particular program is that all the data is publicly available data. So it's all data driven, there's no subjective analysis. So it's rock solid, it's bulletproof. So one thing that we can do and that we are doing is we noticed that there were other completely unknown websites who were allowing people to go online and evaluate credit cards themselves. So you go to a credit card, what we're calling our credit card selector tool, you enter your information. How much do you spend every month? Do you carry a balance? What kind of card would you like? Do you need a business travel card? Do you need a cashback card, whatever? And we've now put this tool online, allowing anybody to come in, enter their own information, and it will spit out the the credit cards that deliver the most in value based on their search criteria. This did cost us some money, but we were able to cover it with a Ontario Media Development Corporation grant. We're now funding what are now going to be quarterly updates to this using our own internally generated funds. But all of this information that spits out the cards is all collected during our annual Canada's Best Credit Cards ranking. And then we'll update it as new cards come on the market, as policies, et cetera, change. And we're able to monetize this because, #1, a lot of people come to our website to use this credit card tool. And we're able to put, we can roadblock ads around it. We can put sponsored listings above the organic search listings, and we get paid for that. And we can also put apply now buttons. So you can buy a little button that will appear here that says apply now, and it links directly to the credit card issuer's website, and they then pay us on a cost per acquisition basis. So every time, depending on the credit card company, some will pay you simply for the referral, and some will pay you every time that applicant actually is approved for the card. And the market rate right now is $80 to $120 per approval. And it costs us nothing to actually put that little button up there. The reason that we have a competitive advantage in this area, when there are already half a dozen websites doing this, is because we're MoneySense, and through our magazine, our website, and our sister properties at Rogers Media, we have the ability to reach millions of people in Canada every month to tell them that if they want to know what the best credit card is for them, that they should come to our website. Nobody else has that. So again, just to reiterate something I said earlier, you really want to innovate not only in product, but also in process or practice. Look outside of your business for new ways to do business, to run your business. And most of my presentation is about process rather than about product. So what I will recommend, though, is a website that I think I read it pretty much daily, but it's Neiman Lab. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Neiman Lab, but it just produces amazing coverage, very practical, helpful coverage that explores how publishers, magazine and newspaper publishers, are transitioning from print to digital, sometimes the other way around. And the nice thing about it is they produce a lot of coverage about Canadian media properties. Just in the past month, they've covered the La Presse canceling their Monday to Friday newspaper. They've talked about the Toronto Star launching its new app, and they've talked about La Presse Plus, which is the very well-known La Presse tablet app that now has, I think, 4 times the circulation of their print property. Just an amazing story there. But go to Neiman Lab pretty much every day. They have a daily newsletter, and you just learn so much about our industry. Strategy number 3 is to seek trusted advisors. And even though the people who run Profit 500 companies are very smart, they're very well trained, they're generally very well experienced, there's one thing that they know that they don't know, and that's the fact that they don't know everything. So they're very good at finding people who can help them run their businesses. And to do this, they create advisory boards. So the average half of Profit 500 companies have an advisory board. Sometimes it's more like a board of directors, which a public company is mandated to have. But quite often it's just a collection of people selected by the chief executive to meet on maybe a quarterly basis and help them explore some issues. So it's basically a board meeting, but it's more about, instead of being about financial reporting and due diligence, it's more about, hey, here's an opportunity on the table, I'm not sure what to do. Here's a challenge that my company has. What do you guys think about it? So the reason you want to do this as the head of a company is because, number one, it takes you outside the weeds, above the weeds. You get a lot more perspective on your business than you would have if you were exploring every challenge by yourself or just with your senior management team, who can, probably have many of the same biases and the same viewpoint that you do. It brings a structure and a formalized process to exploring opportunities and solving the problems that face your business. It forces you to meet at least on a quarterly basis if you have them quarterly. And finally, of course, it creates lots of connections because your advisors are going to be very friendly to you when it comes to either referring you to their contacts or vice versa. Now, whatever it is that you do in your businesses, the point here is that it's most valuable when the group of people that you bring to the table are not all people identical to you. So, and they're not people with a vested interest in the decisions you make. So a lot of advisory boards will have the company's accountant and the company's lawyer and the company's HR manager and the VP of sales on it. And the problem is they all have turf that they're trying to protect, and they're going to restrict the discussion. It's very hard to be truly innovative when it's a bunch of people who are all from the same background, who don't actually, in some cases, don't want things to change. So a good advisory board, in the case of an entrepreneur, finds entrepreneurs who are in other industries. Number one, the entrepreneurs know what you're going through, so that's very valuable to you. They can commiserate with you. They understand the pressure you're under, but at the same time, they have come to your business from a completely different viewpoint, and they don't have a vested interest in it. They don't care if you drive your company into the ground or make $1 trillion next year. They're just there to provide their advice, and if you want to follow it, great, and if you don't, it's no skin off their nose. So they bring entrepreneurs to the table. I would suggest that if you are in the magazine business, and you all are, and you want to create an advisory board, let's say you're a publisher, I would bring people from television, radio, manufacturing, and retail to your table. If you're a web editor, maybe just within your own company, you bring somebody from sales, somebody from editorial, somebody from marketing, and somebody from print circulation to the table. And better yet, they will be people from outside of your company in different fields, because you'll just get the perspective that you currently lack. And the great thing about an advisory board is they ask all sorts of the questions that you might think are dumb questions, or that your staff or colleagues might think are dumb, but end up not being dumb questions, because they just don't know any better. If you can't or you don't want to create an advisory board, one thing that you can do is create a peer advisory group. Join a peer advisory group. There are many organizations out there who will bring a group of people together, in this case entrepreneurs together, every month or every quarter to discuss their mutual challenges, to mutually discuss individual challenges and opportunities. So a group like Entrepreneurs Organization, which used to be called the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, will facilitate the gathering of 8 CEOs who are all running their own small businesses, but who are not who are not in the same industry. They're not competitors of yours, and they will help you discuss the problems and the challenges that you face. It's not necessarily cheap, but it's certainly an easy way to get the feedback that an advisory board can bring you. And peer advisory is extraordinarily powerful, and here's a stat that will show you just how much it is. Among Canadian businesses, by my calculation, 1/100% of all chief executives or business owners belong to a peer advisory group, whereas among the Profit 500, 15% of those people belong to peer advisory right now. And if we look back over the 5 or 10 years that they've been in business, about 50% of them have belonged to a peer advisory group at some point during their company's evolution. So it just goes to show you that if you can get your peer group together on a regular basis, you can, it just creates a lot of opportunity to ask the dumb questions, to figure out how other people are handling the same challenges that you're handling. You can throw an opportunity that's in front of you at them and see what they think about it. Now, I'm not aware of a lot of peer advisory groups in the magazine industry or in the web industry, so I would suggest you start your own. Every year we have a group of 500 CEOs come to Toronto for our Profit 500 CEO Summit. We put them in roundtables for just an hour where they get to talk with a facilitator about the challenges and opportunities they face. They share that information and they leave the table. Everybody has everyone else's business card, and I would say 10% of the time the people at that table decide that they want to continue to meet. So if you want to take advantage of this opportunity, find 5 or 6 people in your functional area who have the same job description as you, and get them together every once in a while. They need to be like-minded. They need to understand the value that they'll get from sitting and talking with somebody in the same industry. You don't want them to be competitors for obvious reasons. And you can start at the bar, and many of these groups, when they do start, even when it's entrepreneurs, they don't start in a boardroom, they start at the restaurant over beers. And eventually you can migrate the peer advisory group to the boardroom, or wherever it is that you choose to meet. Strategy number 4 is to turbocharge your team. I think we all know, and especially in Alberta, people know how hard it is to find and keep good people. And good people ultimately are the only source of competitive advantage, because it's people who come up with the ideas, it's people who come up with strategies, it's people who have to execute everything you do in your business. So if you're not working with really good people, you cannot sustain any competitive advantage that you develop. So how do Canada's fastest growing companies do this in their own businesses? Well, first of all, they reward individual performance, because they know that if you reward good performance, you're much more likely to get it. So 79% of the companies on the Profit 500 offer individual performance bonuses. 42% do open book management. So open book management is where you share sensitive financial and operational details with your staff very broadly. It's not just the senior executive team in these companies who gets to see how much profit the company is making, how many customers they lost in the past month, etc. Everybody in the company gets to see it, which freaks a lot of business owners out. But you can see 42% of these fast-growing companies do this. And it's good for a few reasons. Number one, when you share that kind of information with your team, they get to understand the true state of the business. And frankly, most employees think that their business is doing way, way better, or that the owner is making way, way more money than they really are. It makes it much more easy to see how their own behavior drives the business. If they don't know how profitable the business is, it's very hard for you to tell them you're doing a great job or you're doing a terrible job, depending on how profitable the company is, because that proof point isn't there. So they need data in order to understand exactly what it is that they do as individuals that moves the business forward. And finally, when you share this kind of information with your employees, you're demonstrating that you trust them. And when they feel that they trust you, or that you trust them, they're going to start to trust you a bit more. And research shows that the number one factor driving employee engagement, and employee engagement drives almost every metric in every business, is trust. When your employees trust you, you'll have a much better bottom line. And finally, 31% of them offer profit sharing plans. So, every employee gets a cut of the profit at the end of the year. How many of you are in companies that do one of these three things? Just a quick show of hands. 1, 2, 3 of you. Okay, so only 3 of you are in companies that do any of these things. Should I ask how many of your companies do all 3? I shouldn't ask, or I'm just getting that. So no one in the room works for a company that does all 3. Remember that company KMI Publishing, who published Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine? They do all 3. Strategy number 5, and I'm going to draw things to a close now, is to grow beyond your borders. Now, you might think initially that this means it's all about selling into the US and other English-speaking markets, and even other non-English-speaking markets, and that's where I'm going to start at least. Nearly 60% of all Profit 500 companies export. They generated $8.3 billion in annual revenue, or annual export revenue last year. And here are 2 of the companies that are working in foreign markets. So as I think I mentioned earlier, Lab Manager, of course, is not just serving lab managers in Canada, it's serving lab managers in English-speaking markets. KMI Publishing KMI Publishing actually has a sister company that operates in Australia and has a similar suite of publications that sell into the Australian market. So here's an organization that's found a way to tap into foreign markets. So both of these companies, the only 2 magazine companies on the Profit 500 list, are both operating in foreign markets. Sometimes we think it's very difficult to expand beyond the Canadian border. So hopefully this is an inspiring example and not a depressing one. This is Chandra Clark. She's a former journalist. And I'll start off the top. I'll tell you that she homeschools her kids, and she has 4. And she's also a very successful entrepreneur who's put up some numbers like this. 4 million in annual sales, 241% growth over the past 5 years. She's now been on our list for, I think, 5 consecutive years, at least 4. Operates out of Chatham, Ontario, which is not a Calgary or not a Toronto. And again, I said she's a former journalist, and the reason she got into this business, which is a proofreading and copy editing business, is because as a journalist, she just pulled her hair out every time she received a press release that had a grammatical or spelling error in it. So she thought there's a lot of companies that need this help, and what she realized is that there are a lot of companies in non-English speaking markets that are trying to produce English content, right? And they need help doing that. So what she's assembled over the since 1997, when she started this business, is an army of proofreaders and copy editors who deliver 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week service in 60 countries around the world. You can see that 93% of her revenue is from exports. Each of those freelancers operates in their local country and helps translate, proofread and copy edit English content that's typically created by companies where English is not the first language. So she's made a very tidy business of that, and she uses a lot of online technology to coordinate these people. If you go to the scribendi.com website, you can actually enter your job, and she has developed an engine that will actually generate an instant quote on what your proofreading and copy editing job will do. And here's an amazing stat. Every single week, this army of freelance copy editors and proofreaders scattered across 60 countries around the world reads 1.5 million words of copy. And she still homeschools her kids in Chatham, Ontario. So be inspired or be depressed. So that was a woman who decided that she was going to grow beyond our physical borders. But I also think growing beyond your borders means doing stuff that we don't traditionally think that we should be doing as magazine publishers, printing physical magazines or simply operating websites. There are many, many, many opportunities out there that we can use our brands and our infrastructure and our existing assets as leverage to penetrate. And frankly, it's becoming no longer a choice. We can't really sit back and wait for the industry to turn around and come back to where it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago when I started. We have to be expanding our organizations into other areas. We have to find new avenues to create revenue. And they're not necessarily about creating content. So I want to share this thing that we're doing at MoneySense. It's called MoneySense Approved, and it is sort of a seal of approval program, but it's more like an accreditation. So it combines seal of approval with an accreditation process. We know that there are upwards of 90,000 financial advisors in Canada. We know that most financial advisors aren't really that good. They may have their various certifications, but they're just like anyone in any other field of practice. Just because you have a law degree or you pass your accounting exams or you have a BA in history doesn't make you a particularly good, doesn't guarantee that you're going to deliver a great service to whoever your customer is. So they're struggling, consumers are struggling with that. The way people find financial advisors is they typically talk to their neighbor or their uncle, and that person recommends their guy. It's the same thing that happens with tax preparers and real estate agents, and we may not all be happy with our real estate agents or tax preparers. We just don't know, but we'll believe Uncle Fred because I don't have any other way of evaluating a potential financial advisor. At the same time, financial advisors are in this situation where it takes them a lot of time and effort to find new clients. And now there's a lot of regulatory change that is going to force them to be very, very transparent about the service that they're providing and the fees they're actually charging their clients. And it's not going to be pretty for financial advisors over the next few years. So we think that what the world needs, what both consumers need and what financial advisors need, is a accreditation seal of approval program that identifies the best financial advisors in Canada and gives consumers a very easy way using a searchable database to find those good advisors because we've approved them and we've put them all in a searchable database. So this launched to advisors in July. It's got great traction so far. We're launching it, the consumer-facing website launches in November once we have a lot of accredited MoneySense approved advisors in the database. And we expect this to be a very big business for us in the next few years. We do not create any content around it. It is not part of the traditional publishing model. It is a startup that allows us to grow beyond our little magazine website borders. And hopefully it can show you that there are ways to expand beyond what you currently do and to make much more profit and hopefully become the next magazine publisher that joins the Profit 500 ranking. So I know Kim's waiting for me to stop, so I will stop. Thanks very much.